Welcome to Sense of Style. I'm Stuart. 8 iconic Hall of Fame fragrances. And I got to be honest, this is the very first year I've paid really close attention to fragrance releases. I've talked about 70 of them in my shorts, and I just can't help but notice that the vast majority of these fragrances, no one's going to be talking about in a couple of years. Like there's been some flat out bombs, but most of them are kind of meh. I remember getting up there and talking about a lot of them going, and thinking, well, this one's going to be really huge. And yeah, no, it's tough. It's tough to be a fragrance that, 10 years later, people are still talking about. And so we get distracted by all these new releases when really, it's important to pay attention to the ones that have really stood the test of time, that have been one of the top 2 or 3 fragrance releases, in the last few years. Those are the ones we want. Fragrance number 1, this is Versace Parfums, and this is the fragrance that inspired this list, because every now and again I'll do a check to see what fragrances that I haven't talked about in a while. I haven't talked about this one in 6 months. This is like an all-time classic. It's like 15 years old. It's Alberto Maria's. It's like a stood the test of time. And I've been distracted by all the new ones and I haven't talked about this one at all. The funny thing about this one, though, is the more that I get to know about it, the more I appreciate it. The more you're into fragrances, the more you're going to appreciate this one. Because when I first tried it, all I got was the lemon and bergamot. I'm like, okay, big deal. It's a really nice, fresh citrus fragrance. But then about a year after, I started to pick up the tonka, the little bit of sweetness in the base. I'm like, oh, okay, that's a nice little touch. You don't get that with a lot of citrus fragrances. And now, like it's 5 years on, I was putting this on for the video. I'm like, wow, there's a floral element to this as well. There's a little bit of floral creaminess. It's very, very subtle, but I can pick it up. It's that hyacinth and rose, a little bit of creaminess that you get. Yeah, so it's more than just a fresh fragrance. It is, after all, an Alberto Maria's creation. And this one's a Hall of Famer for sure. Fragrance number 2, this is Creed's Milliseme Imperial. And this fragrance will be 30 years old in a couple of months, which is crazy when you think about it, because you wouldn't think of this as like a 30-year-old fragrance. This is a masterpiece. So it's just a strange, odd creation. It's got salt, sea notes, and fruit. It's that salty watermelon thing that just really, really works. It's fantastic. Now, I have to admit, this particular formulation that I've got is a modern one, and Creed got taken over by 2 different companies. The performance of this is terrible. So what I recommend is getting Club de Nuit Milestone, which was released in 2019. That's pretty modern. It's weird for Armaf to be copying a fragrance 25 years after it was released, but that's how good this is. So yeah, Club de Nuit Milestone, much better performance. Pass on this one for now until Creed wake up and smell the coffee. Fragrance number 3, this is Prada Amber Pour Homme Intense. I did a short video on this fragrance just the other day, and somebody contacted me to say the prices have started to go up at the discounters. They've also heard about discontinuation, and that's one of the reasons why you really need to pay attention more to classics than to the hype new releases, because this one's almost 20 years old. This one has stood the test of time. It is an all-time classic. It's kind of an office fragrance in a way, but I think it's even more elegant than an office fragrance. It's that amber myrrh fresh combination. This one is heavy on the myrrh as compared to the original. This one is also darker. It's got some patchouli. There's a little bit of amber in this as well, so it's mildly sweet, but it's very elegant, very classy. Performance is great, but not, 8 feet of projection. A very classy 2 feet. Yeah, think about buying this one sooner than later. I don't know for sure if it's been discontinued, but if it has, it's better than buying one of these new ones that's going to last a year. Fragrance number 4, this is Oud Noir by Versace. This is probably the most approachable oud fragrance on the market. It's similar to Oud Wood, but Oud Wood is like way more expensive. And this, you don't need to go to Oud Wood. This one is really nice itself. And it's just a great creation. What they did was they took oud, which is a dense note, which is hard for people to digest, and they made it as fresh as possible. They did 3 different kinds of freshness: citrus freshness, resinous freshness, and spicy freshness to freshen up that oud and make it accessible, and it is. Yeah, this one is an absolute classic, and that compliment is probably going to come, a couple of hours in when the cardamom starts to rise and mix with the oud. That's when it's kind of more of a seductive date night style fragrance. Now, in terms of performance, longevity, I don't think anyone has an issue with. I certainly don't. I have no problem with the projection. Some people think it's maybe a little light on the projection. I don't know. I don't get that, but I'm willing to listen. Either way, definitely worth a purchase. Classic. Fragrance number 5, CK1 Shock. Now, this one might seem like a strange classic. However, it is like some 17 years old or something crazy like that. It's been around for a long time. It's incredibly cheap. You can get 200 milliliters of this for $30, at the discounter. So it's really inexpensive, but it just smells good. It just does. Yeah, it's synthetic, a little bit synthetic. You're going to get that when, something's so inexpensive. But I really like the formulation of the sweet tobacco in this because you're not being overwhelmed by either honey or vanilla. It's an amber sweetness here. So you can get a feel for the tobacco. You can get a feel for the spices. In this case, the spices are black pepper and cardamom. So it is a nicely well-balanced, spicy, sweet tobacco. And then when it comes to performances, it's actually very, very solid. It's about 5 hours longevity. You definitely get a fair bit of projection, more so than you would expect for even a $40, $45 fragrance. The performance here is actually pretty good. Fragrance number 6, this is Nautica Voyage. And if you've watched the channel for any length of time, I've been very, very critical of this fragrance. However, I still respect it for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's not the kind of thing that somebody like me is going to wear. I live in a very cool climate, and this is a fresh fragrance. I am an experienced collector, so I'm not into something that is, kind of basic in terms of a scent profile. And then in terms of price, I prefer much more expensive fragrances. I can afford them. However, when it comes to overall popularity, if you're living in a warmer climate, if you like fresher fragrances, this one is incredibly popular. It does also have some genuine positive. The longevity of this is great. The price is great. And what I like about the scent profile is it's got fruitiness. There's an apple in it, but it's also got a green quality, which I think is really important when it comes to blue fragrances. They were smart enough to put green leaves in here, giving it some freshness. So while this is not my favorite fragrance, Jesus, this thing is almost 20 years old, and it's still selling like hotcakes. And if you live in a warm climate and you're not like a hardcore fragrance guy, this is definitely still worth a purchase. Fragrance number 7 is another fresh, inexpensive fragrance, but this one I can get behind 150%. This is Davidoff's Cool Water, and this is almost 40 years old. And the reason that I like this one more is that it's fresher, it's more innovative, it's more distinctive. This is a fragrance where if you wore it in the 1990s or early 2000s and you recognize it, you're going to be like, oh, okay, that's nostalgic. It's going to smell old to you. However, this is not something that would smell old to someone in modern day, a young Gen Z or a millennial. For the most part, this is just going to smell really fresh. This still really works. And if, honest to God, if I'm looking for an inexpensive, fresh fragrance to get a compliment with, this is top 3 in my collection. This thing, it just works. There's a reason this was like the number 1 selling fragrance in the 1990s. I think we've come full circle with this one, and this one is safe to wear again. I certainly have no problem wearing it. And in terms of performance, no issues at all. Like, I get 6 hours, I get a lot of projection, and I do get compliments. It's basically green notes, C notes, lavender, a little bit of mint, a little bit of rosemary. This one will get you compliments. I don't care how old it is. Fragrance number 8, this is Azzaro Wanted by Night. And this is the youngest fragrance on the list. It's only 7 years old. It kind of also has been taken over by the Most Wanted, which is a little bit sweeter. but I really think this was the breakthrough fragrance for Azzaro. At least it was for me. And if you look at the Fragrantica ratings on this one, it's still high. It's not as high as the Most Wanted, but this one is still going to be talked about in a decade. People are still going to be wearing it. It's not the original Wanted, which is pretty much gone. No one's interested in that because it has better performance, and it's still a really modern scent profile. So it has vanilla, not as much as the Most Wanted, which of course has the most vanilla and is the most popular. But it still has it. It's got fruit, it's got tobacco, and it's got cinnamon. It's a spicier version of it. I don't know if I was going to say I like it better. I don't know if I like it better, but it's certainly as good as the Most Wanted for me, and it's not something you want to forget about. This one will still be around in at least 5 years. Anyway, yeah, don't get distracted. And I'm really bad at that because I'm always throwing out new fragrances at you guys. Try not to get distracted anyway. I don't want to nag with the new fragrance releases because, yeah, the classics really, for the most part, are the ones you should be focusing on. And sometimes I have to remind myself of that. Anyway, thanks for watching.